Start recording. Oh, and let me go ahead and change my name. And hi everyone, welcome. I am Jamie. If we haven't met before, welcome. And I'm just going to give students about 1 more minute and then we'll get started. If you want to take a moment to think about any questions you have about the personal essay, you can share maybe what you're writing yours about, maybe some insights you've had from the process, any questions. But today's class is meant to be interactive and really helpful at this point in the summer. Right, so we just go ahead and start our slideshow. So we are doing some workshops here in August to go over a lot of the purposes, the themes, the recommendations as you finalize your college essays, perhaps revising them, or in some cases you might just be starting to write some of them. So no matter where you are in the process, it's really helpful, especially here at the beginning of August, to take some time to sort of take inventory, reflect on what you've written, kind of step back and reread it. And in some cases, you might be just beginning on some essays, maybe some of your supplements, maybe wrapping up your UCs. So just taking some time to take some inventory in where you are in the process. You might also have recently been focusing a lot on your writing. So today we're going to look at some great examples on the personal essay and just kind of reflect on what you think the strengths are in these essays and how you might incorporate some of their writing styles into yours. One thing I do want to mention too is as of yesterday, the Common App site updated. So we've been checking to see if any of the questions have changed. In most cases, they have not. In some cases, they have. So as you're going through and writing school to school, just double check on the Common App that the question has stayed the same. You might have started writing something in July. Just make sure here in August that the prompt is the same. But it's all up and running, updated for 2025. So let's get started. Today's lesson is just going to review the personal essay. And at this point, we hope that all students have started writing and are almost finished with their personal essay. But in some cases, you might be writing a new one. You may just be getting started. So taking a look at the questions and some really great samples and how you can craft a very effective one. You also in midsummer might have a new idea. Maybe you went on a trip. Maybe you took a summer program. Maybe you had research and want to write a whole new essay. So in that case, it's kind of a great place to stop and pause and kind of revisit the process. We want you to really end this summer with the essay that's your favorite and that you feel really confident submitting to your colleges. So whether or not you've written your essay, just to review in general, you get 7 choices. These are the personal essay questions, also known as the Common App essay. And this essay will be submitted to all US colleges. A note for University of California, they do not accept this essay, but you can shorten it and use it as one of the 4 essays. So you have 7 prompts to choose from. And many students ask, do I only have to do one or many? You only have to do one, and it's a 650-word essay. You can write about background, identity, interest, or talent. You can write about lessons you've taken from obstacles or challenges. You can talk about a time when you questioned or challenged a belief. For number 4, this was new last year, about gratitude and reflecting on something that someone has done for you that's made you happy or thankful. Number five, one of my favorite ones, an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and new understanding. This is a really great question. Sixth one, a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging it makes you lose all track of time. We'll be looking at a great example of that today. Or seven, an essay on any topic of your choice. So before we continue, does anyone have any questions about the Common App prompts, the length of the essay, or just any questions to start off today's class? All right, and I encourage everyone to take notes, jot down ideas, jot down questions. We really want you to be leaving these midsummer workshops with a lot of ideas and kind of refreshing on the application and essay process. So many students ask, what should I write about, right? And this is where the brainstorms earlier in the summer came in. But you may have had a very busy and interesting July. There might be some news stories. You might be reflecting, well, is the essay I wrote in June the essay I want to definitely submit? So these are some great guidelines to follow in terms of picking this very important topic that will be shared with all of your colleges. So think about these three aspects of it and what a good personal statement does. It tells a small story from your life in detail. We don't want to write a really broad essay and generalize. You should pick one very important but smaller story and go into detail. And the samples we'll be looking at today are great exemplars of that. An essay about one math project you struggled with is better than an essay about everything you've ever done in high school. So we want to go in depth, not too much breadth. It's primarily about who you are now. You might be writing, last year, there was one of my mentees, he wrote about a story from kindergarten, but he made it relevant to today. And it was this really great connection, but back to kindergarten, and this lesson he recalled from then. So you can go all the way back to elementary school, middle school, ninth grade, but it should really relate to who you are now. Your essay should mostly cover events that happened 3 or few years ago, but in some cases it might go back further. And in most cases, not events happen that when you were 8, but you can check with your editor, talk it through, and it might make for the perfect story. But again, who you are now, who you will be when you go off to college next year. And thirdly, it demonstrates your positive qualities. Some examples of positive qualities are perseverance, determination, creativity, and optimism. So we want to really focus on positivity and not have a more negative or pessimistic tone in the essay. You can certainly talk about challenges. You can certainly talk about lessons you've learned, failures, setbacks, but ultimately it should show what you've learned from them and how you've overcame them. Now, just some kind of questions that come up as you're considering your topic, and you may have asked these as well. And let me just make some space here so we can see them all. So you might think, help, my life hasn't been cool enough. I remember asking this question when I was writing my college essay. What do I write about? I don't think my life's been cool enough. You don't need to be a professional snowboarder in order to lead an interesting life. And you certainly don't need to travel the world in order to write an interesting personal statement. What's important is that you're writing about your life experience, your point of view. The colleges want to know, how do you see the world? How do you think? What do you value? Right? And only you can say that. So rather than focus on hey, I haven't been a professional snowboarder, or maybe I haven't traveled the world, but I know my life and my life experience, and picking those very meaningful or special stories to you to highlight. Should my personal essay be about my major? A lot of students ask this and say, well, should it be really academic focused? No, this can really come up later in your supplements. It can relate, but it doesn't need to. And if it does in any way, it should have a different facet or aspect to it. If your school really needs to know more about your chosen major, they'll ask you about it in a supplemental essay. So let's say you plan on majoring in computer science and you really, really want to write about that. There's likely going to be a supplemental essay that says, why do you want to major in this topic? So in that supplemental, you can talk about taking AP Computer Science, or the summer program you attended, or the app that you made. But if you really want to cover that in your Common App essay, you might want to write about a team experience where you really had to lead, or maybe a challenge and learning some skills, and how it really taught you how to persist. So if you do choose to write about your intended college major, make it more about you and how it's built your character, and maybe your resilience or perseverance. The more technical subject academic side of it, you can save for your supplemental essays. So these are just some common questions that come up for the personal essay. And here's another one that comes up a lot. I hate bragging, and this feels like bragging. Many students feel compelled to downplay certain accomplishments because talking positively about themselves might feel kind of braggy. Well, I did work as a camp counselor, but it seems self-absorbed to say I'm great at working with kids. Unfortunately, no one else is going to tell your admissions reader. This student is just being modest. Actually, they're an awesome leader, and they're great at working with kids, and they have an incredible sense of humor. If you don't show off your positive qualities, readers will assume those qualities don't exist. And remember, you're up against a lot of students who will be writing confidently about their positive traits. So we don't want to downplay our accomplishments. We don't want to diminish all of this fantastic work we've done in high school and prior. We want to really be positive about it. So you can check with your editor. If you might feel like it's braggy, ask them. You might want to change the tone, but we certainly want to really uplift and play up all of the wonderful things you've done in high school. So don't worry about if you might sound like you're bragging. We really do want to showcase everything you've done. And there's a certain tone you can strike with that. We'll see in some of the samples. All right, and finally, a question comes up. My life is boring. Can I make something up? Every so often, a student is compelled to invent parts of their life story, either because they think that part of the real story is boring, or too complicated, or too hard to explain. There are a lot of obvious reasons not to do this. And in fact, colleges can kick you out of school if they find out you lied in your application. But there's two more, even more important reasons. It's really easy to tell when students are making something up. And secondly, the made up parts of the story are never as interesting as the truth, seriously. So just write down what you remember. If it's really that boring, your editor can help you condense or skip over the boring parts. No need to start inventing new life events. So with this section of the lesson today in mind, you may have considered some of these points or some of these questions. If that's the case, early August is the perfect time to check in with your editor and ask for help and ask for their insight on how to develop your essays. So with that in mind, before we move on to some examples, does anyone have any questions, comments, or would be interested in sharing a little bit about what you're writing about for your Common App essay? right, well, as we move on to some brainstorming techniques, I do want to say, especially to these points about, that we just covered, I still have my college essay. Back then, we had more word processors or typewriters. So this was many years ago, but it still stands as one of the most important pieces of writing I've ever written. And I often wonder, why was that? And the reason why is it was because the first time I wrote an autobiography, a memoir, something really about my life, and even though it's been many, many years since I've used that essay, it still is one of the most significant, meaningful, and special essays I've ever written. So this is a really important moment in your education. Write about yourself, write about your life experience. This is your story, your autobiography, your memoir to share with the school. And hopefully, and I really hope that you keep your essay for years to come and can look back on it and reflect proudly about it. So you might be thinking, well, I have a lot of ideas. I don't know where to begin. Or July, there was so much going on. There's so many news stories. I want to consider, how do I kind of archive them or track them? So one way to do that is just start listing memories. You don't have to write a big essay for each one, but just start jotting down ideas. I really like to take notes on my phone, or you might have a written journal you keep in your pocket, but getting into the habit of jotting down memories, um, what's happening here in August and September, you might want to update your essays with new information. So we want to be really observant of our lives and really archive and gather that information. So let's take a look at this student's case, what they thought was interesting about their life. Painting outdoors with my friend Brooke. My last orchestra concert before COVID. Struggling to talk to my grandma on the phone in Portuguese. Taking pictures of my dorm neighbors for a photography class. Playing at Carnegie Hall. Hiking every Eno River Trail last year. My first mandolin lesson. My tradition of rereading every Tamora Pierce book every few years. Running a 5-mile race and hearing about my grandpa passing away. Now, these stories are very unique to this student. And if you go ahead and list your 10 memories, you can take a look at them and think, which one was the most meaningful? Which one was the most impactful? Which was the most special? Which one do I feel compelled to write about? And from there, you can go and select one or two from your list. But before you start writing, jot down your memories, see which ones stand out, and then begin writing. And you don't necessarily have to do 20 or 30. Start with 5 or 10. All right, so we've talked about these different techniques, what to consider, how to start developing ideas. What we're going to do here is we're going to be looking at many samples today and really analyzing them. What do we like about them? How did they structure their essay? Maybe how can I structure my essay in a similar way? So for the first one, we're really going to break it down section by